This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Hello everyone. Good Erev Shabbos. So now we're leaving Uman, and if we could just say over one essay, another very thought-provoking concept from Rabbi Nachman, very interesting concept, and I think it's a teaching that certainly captures the essence of who Rabbi Nachman was and what he stood for. We're going to discuss a great enigma, a dilemma, regarding a personality in the Tanakh, that we have various contradicting streams when we learn about this particular individual, and it's going to be on this week's Parsha, Parsha's Pinchas. And the individual that we encounter was a descendant of Dan. It's not an individual that we're very familiar with. In the Zohar HaKadosh in Parshas Balak, the Zohar describes the capture of Osama bin Laden. No, just joking. Of Bilaam. And basically the Zohar tells us Bilaam flew up on his broomstick and he went up into the heavens, and an individual went after him and flew after him. Who is this individual? His name is Sali. Sali? I never heard of Sali. Who's Sali? The Zohar HaKadosh says Sali was the son of Dan. Sali braid the Shifta de Dan. So it doesn't necessarily mean exactly the son of Dan, but a descendant of Dan. He flew after Bilaam, and he used also the certain supernatural powers to fly after Bilaam, and Bilaam rises through the various levels of the heaven, and Sali's after him on his broomstick, and they're trying to capture Bilaam. And finally Pinchas gives Sali Eitzah how to knock off Bilaam, and ultimately, with the help of Pinchas, they get Bilaam out of the heavens, they get Bilaam down to earth, and Abahu Shaita, the Zohar HaKadosh says, at that time, Pinchas tells Sali, kill him. So both Pinchas and Sali are involved in killing Bilaam. So interesting, who kills Bilaam? Sali, together with Pinchas. Who's Sali? A descendant of Shevet Dan. Okay, so here it is. Somebody from Shevet Dan has a distinction of killing Bilaam. It's very interesting. If you look at the ancestry of people who accomplished great things for Klal Yisrael, often the individuals come from Shevet Yehuda, but there's some kind of sort of odd combination of Shevet Yehuda and Shevet Dan. So for example, we're all familiar that when it comes to the construction of the Mishkan, Parshas Kisisa, Va'ani, Hinei Nasati Itai Eis Ahaliyav V'Nachisamach L'matei, Dan, V'Kalei, Uvelev Kol Chachamim Nasati Chachma. And then we have Ulahai Rois Nasan B'Libai. We know Betzalel came from who? From Shevet Yehuda. Hu V'Ahaliyav V'Nachisamach L'matei Dan. So we have this odd couple, so to say, this unusual combination of Shevet Yehuda and Shevet Dan. And the Medrash Rabbah tells us, why would the Rebbeinu Shalom combine together the greatest of all the Shvatim with, so to speak, the lowest of all the Shvatim? Shevet Dan was considered, as we're going to see, in certain ways, the lowest of all the Shvatim. So the Medrash tells us, Amar Rabbi Chanina Hagadov Hakatan Shavim. Hashem is showing that whether you come from Shevet Yehuda or whether you come from Shevet Dan, all Shvatim are equal, all individuals are equal in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But it's of note that who constructed the Mishkan? Betzalel of Shevet Yehuda and Ahaliyav from Shevet Dan. Likewise, there's a Yalkut Shemaini. Mashiach. Who does Mashiach come from? So of course Mashiach is from the Davidic dynasty. Mashiach is a descendant of Shevet Yehuda. But the Yalkut Shemaini says, Mashiach ben David, Sheyatza mishnei shvatim, Aviv mi Yehuda, v'imay mi Dan. His father is from Yehuda, and his mother is from Shevet Dan. So again, we have this unusual combination and this unusual shidduch of Shevet Yehuda and Shevet Dan. Furthermore, it's interesting that so the Yalkut Shemaini is telling us that Mashiach, his father is from Yehuda and his mother is from Shevet Dan. By the way, Shimshon HaGibar, who we know is also compared to the Mashiach, because the pasuk says in Vayechi that Shimshon HaGibar, Dan Yadin Amai Ke'achad Shivtei Yisrael, someone will emerge from Dan who will be like one of the Shvatim, and Rashi says Shimshon HaGibar is compared to Mashiach. How? What's the comparison? Just like Mashiach, who does Mashiach come from? Mashiach's father is from Yehuda, his mother is from Dan. Shimshon HaGibar, his father was from Dan, and his mother was from Yehuda. So that's the comparison between Shevet Yehuda and Shevet Dan. So here we have the Mishkan. Who is the Mishkan made by? Combination, Yehuda and Dan. Mashiach comes from Yehuda and Dan. Who does Shimshon come from? Yehuda and Dan. Let's talk about for a moment who kills Asav. Remember the story of when Asav, the Gemara in Soita, Daf Yud Gimel, tells us that the Shvatim were going to bury Yaakov Avinu, and they come to the Maras Machpelah, and who rears his ugly head? Asav is there. Asav says, over my dead body, I'm the Bechar, I own the burial spot. So they said, what are you talking about? Your brother Yaakov bought it from you. So Asav said, he only bought my regular portion, he didn't buy the portion of the Bechar. So they said, no, he bought both portions. So they said, Asav says, Achvi shtarcha, show me the shtar. So they said, Oy Gevalt, we left the shtar in Mitzrayim. So they send Naphtali to run back to Mitzrayim. Naphtali is Ayala Shalucha. Naphtali is a swift deer, a swift gazelle, and Naphtali runs back to Mitzrayim. In the meantime, there's an individual by the name of Chushim Ben Dan. And Chushim is standing there, and Chushim is very disturbed that their grandfather was laying Bebizayon. So Chushim says, Vos geht dan? And they said, well, Asav is not allowing us to bury Yaakov Avinu, and we had to go back to Mitzrayim to get the shtar. So Chushim said, and in the meantime, Yaakov is going to lay Bebizayon. So Chushim picks up the sword, he chops off Asav's head, and effectively ending the dispute. Yeah? So according to the Gemara, by the way, the Gemara doesn't tell us the typical account that we learned in Yeshiva. In Yeshiva we learned that Chushim came along and chopped off Asav's head. The Gemara doesn't say that. The Gemara's account is, he smacked him on the head, and Asav's head did not fall off. His eyes popped out, and his eyes went rolling into the Maras Machpelah. So it's interesting, even though we typically think Asav's head is buried in the Maras Machpelah, it's not what the Gemara says. The Gemara says the eyes came out, and the eyes went into the Maras Machpelah. Okay, so you learn the Gemara, and you say to yourself, who killed Asav? What's the answer? Who killed Asav? Asav was killed by Chushim Ben Dan. Frek Tosfos, it's not true. Listen to this Tosfos. Tosfos in Gittin, not on the page. So the Gemara is in Soita on Daf Yud Gimel. Tosfos in Gittin on Nun Hey Amud Beis asks, the Tosfos says there's a Sifri on the pasuk Yadav Ravloi, that when Yehuda killed Asav, so Tosfos asks, it's a stira, because the Gemara says Chushim killed Asav, and the Sifri says Yehuda killed Asav. And for Tosfos, Dov, you're getting a little too comfortable. and for Tosfos, yeah? But we don't know which one. There are a few people named that. Yeah. And for Tosfos, you know who killed Asav? Chushim and Yehuda together. It's a big chiddush. They both killed Asav together. It says Tosfos, Shem Eloi Meis Ba'isa Haka. Chushim smacked him, but he didn't die yet, and Yehuda came and he sealed the deal. So throughout history, we have this odd couple of Yehuda and Dan. Who builds the Mishkan? Yehuda and Dan. Who killed Bilaam? Sali and Pinchas. Who killed Asav? Yehuda and Dan. So it's very interesting that we have this combination of the greatest of the Shvatim, Yehuda, and the lowest of the Shvatim, Dan. What's the pshat in this combination? Because after all, throughout Tanakh, Dan seems to be considered the lowest of all the Shvatim. For example, Parshas Kiseitze, We say Asher Korcha Baderach Vayizaniv B'cha Kol HaNechashalim Acharecha. Who are these Nechashalim Acharecha that Amalek went to attack? So the Yalkut Shemini says, Shevet Dan Shapult Dan Ha'anon. Shevet Dan, who the Anon expectorated. Why? Says the Medrash, Kulan Oivdei Avodah Zarah. Shevet Dan, they were all idol worshippers. In fact, there's a concept that Shevet Dan brought Avodah Zarah already into the Yamsuf. Avar Bayam Tzara, that Shevet Dan already constructed the Pesal Micha in the Yamsuf. So what's going on over here? On the one hand, there's a concept, Dan is always involved in the greatest achievements of Klal Yisrael. They build the Mishkan, they kill Bilaam, they kill Asav. Mashiach comes from Dan. Mashiach is on his father's side from Yehuda, on his mother's side from Dan. Shimshon on his father's side is from Dan, on his mother's side is from Yehuda. So there's this dichotomy in Shevet Dan, that on the one hand they're always involved in the greatest achievements of Klal Yisrael, and on the other hand they're called Nechasholim Acharecha. In fact, the Baal HaTurim says the gematria of Kol HaNechasholim Acharecha Zeh Haya Shiftoi Shel Dan. So how do we reconcile this? What is the status of Dan? Dan is always involved in the greatest achievements of Klal Yisrael, and on the other hand, they're considered the lowest of the Shvatim. Comes Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, and he opens up a new interpretation and a new understanding of the role of Shevet Dan in Machshavas Yisrael. There's a pasuk in Behaloischa. The pasuk in Behaloischa says, "V'nasa degel machanei b'nei Dan ma'asef l'chol ha'machanos." Now, what was the job of Shevet Dan? They were ma'asef l'chol ha'machanos. They gathered in all the camps. So Rashi explains that Shevet Dan had the greatest population. They were meruba b'chlusin, and they traveled last. And anybody who lost an object, Shevet Dan would return it to you. So you had people, they can't find their passport. Moshe said, just go weiter, Dan will find it for you. And you had people who they left their jacket. So Shevet Dan would say, don't worry, we'll get your jacket for you. And you had people who couldn't find their hat. And they said, don't worry, we'll find your hat, we'll ship you your hat. That was the job of Shevet Dan. If you lost a lost object, Shevet Dan would return it to you. This is a very odd job for that Shevet Dan. What were they? They were the Oivdei Avodah Zarah. And if you lost an object, Shevet Dan would return to you your lost object. So Rav Nachman says like this. This Rav Nachman is quoted in the Drashas Beis Yishai. Rav Nachman says an amazing thought. We know everything in the physical world is a parallel of the spiritual world. When Chazal say that Shevet Dan would return the lost objects of anybody who lost an Aveda, this is symbolic, it's allegorical. There were lost souls in the Jewish people. There were people who didn't fit in with the regular yeshiva system. There were people who didn't fit in with the regular program. They were lost. They were Drein Arayin. They had no connection to Yiddishkeit. They were sort of standing in the backs of the shuls, in the hallways, in the coffee room. And who's going to return them? Who's going to find these lost souls and bring them back to the fold? It was the job of Shevet Dan. Shevet Dan's job was to identify those Jews who had no connection, who were lost, who were reeling, who did not have a feeling of Devekas to Klal Yisrael. And Shevet Dan would bring in these lost items, these lost souls, and bring them back to the fold. That's why when Amalek would attack Klal Yisrael, who would Amalek attack? Amalek understood there were always going to be Yidden who were invincible. They were Davuk HaKadosh Baruch Hu on the Torah, and there's no way they could ever harm them. Amalek realized that their vantage point of being able to be successful to attack the Jewish people were those lost souls who lost their connection to Yiddishkeit. But when Amalek saw Shevet Dan, that their avodah was to be ma'asef l'chol ha'machanos, that's really irked Amalek, because that means there's always hope. That means no matter how far lost a Jew is, Shevet Dan could always save the day, could always reel them in, could always gather them in. When we say they were ma'asef l'chol ha'machanos, it means they were able to restore all the lost souls. This past summer in Eretz Yisrael, so we were in Ramat Beit Shemesh, and we went to the kever of Dan, and we saw characters by the kever of Dan, that there's no question that they felt something by the kever of Dan. There was a connection they had by the kever of Dan. You didn't see these chevra anywhere else in Eretz Yisrael. And Reb Nachman is Megala that when Chazal say that Shevet Dan was ma'asif l'chal ha'machanos, I mean they had the ability to gather in these lost souls, bring them back to the fold. So on the one hand, says Reb Nachman, a very interesting idea, that when you see people involved in kiruv, they're always under suspicion. People always are suspicious of them, that they're up to no good, that they have ulterior motives, that they're involved in something bad. They always raise the suspicion of the Jewish people. The reason why Shevet Dan were considered the Neches Shalim, the Oivdei Avodah Zarah, is they were always suspect, but for good reason. Because there's this interesting Reb Tzadok HaKohen. Reb Tzadok HaKohen writes in the Tzidkas HaTzadik that when somebody is involved in bringing back the lost souls of Klal Yisrael, when somebody is involved in Kiruv Rechoikim, Reb Tzadok HaKohen writes, Misha mezakeh l'chayavaya iefshir shlo yidbak b'muma. Someone who's involved in bringing back the guilty, so they can have a positive effect. But it's inevitable that those who are guilty, those who are reeling, those who are far from Hashem, will influence those who are involved in the kiruv. So to speak, kiruv is a two-way street. There, the mekarvim are mekarev the rechoikim, and the rechoikim at the same time are merachik the kroivim. It's a duality. In other words, someone who's involved in kiruv is really being moiser nefesh, literally giving up of their ruchnius, because at the same time they're bringing closer those who are far. Those who are far are drawing far those who are close. But that was the avodah of Shevet Dan. They were ma'asif l'chol ha'machanos. So at the same time that they were the Neches Shalim, and they, so to speak, were always under suspicion that they were Oivdei Avodah Zarah, and perhaps on some remote level they were involved in certain things that were not proper. On the other hand, they were the most beloved members of Klal Yisrael, because they were the ma'asif l'chol ha'machanos. And whenever there was a great achievement in Klal Yisrael, whether it was building the Mishkan, whether it was killing Bilaam, whether it was killing Asav, Shevet Dan had the distinction that they were given the ability to be involved in the highest achievements of Klal Yisrael. And I think this interpretation is very appropriate for the lifetime of Rav Nachman, because I think many people until today feel that Rabbi Nachman was the Me'asef L'chol HaMachanos, that he was the one who recognized that even if a Jew doesn't feel the connection in the classic traditional way, Rav Nachman taught there's no yiush, there's no giving up hope, there's always a connection, there's always a devekos to Klal Yisrael, and there's always a possibility for a Jew, no matter what level they're on, even b'diyuta tachtoina, we could identify that oid, we could identify that part in the Jew that is still good, and we could say oid ma'at ve'in rasha. We could say no matter what level a person is, we could identify something good about them, that they're no longer a rasha. Rav Nachman's interpretation of the avodah of Shevet Dan is very much appropriate for the mission and the life work of Rav Nachman of Breslov himself. So may we be zoicha to appreciate this limud, and each one of us in our way always has the opportunity to be ma'asef l'chol ha'machanos. Rabbi, thank you for listening. Enjoy the rest of your ride.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.